Thank you for standing by, and welcome to the Invex Therapeutics Limited Quarterly Investor Conference Call. All participants are in a listen-only mode. There will be a presentation followed by a question and answer session. If you wish to ask a question, you will need to press the star key followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Tom Duthy, Executive Director. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for listening today. It's my pleasure to present to you a summary of the company's financial performance and quarterly activities for the 3 months ended 30 June 2022, being our Q4 FY22. I trust all of you on today's call have had a chance to read the updated announcement as lodged with ASX this morning. I would now like to provide an overview of the company's fourth quarter performance and 2022 calendar year outlook. I'd like to start with our financials before turning to our operational update. The company closed the quarter in a continued strong financial position with cash and cash equivalents of $29.3 million compared to $30.4 million in Q3, with overall cash outflows for the quarter of $1 million, which was flat versus Q3. Total cash outflows for the entire FY22 period were $3.4 million. Our cash outflows from operating expenditure for the quarter included research and development expenditure of $0.6 million versus $0.67 million in Q3, which reflected costs associated with the company's contract research organisation managing the Phase 3 trial, along with clinical and regulatory consultants and intellectual property costs related to Invex's patent and trademark portfolio. In addition, the company incurred costs associated with direct R&D staff of $0.21 million versus $0.16 million in Q3. Our total cash spend into R&D for the year, excluding R&D staff, was $1.9 million, which was wholeheartedly directed to our clinical program. Our administration and corporate costs of $0.24 million versus $0.21 million in Q3 included compliance costs associated with our ASX listing, director fees, audit and legal costs. On an annual FY22 basis, these costs were well controlled, coming in at $0.9 million. Government grants and tax incentives were nil compared to $0.18 million in Q3. As the company is undertaking active R&D in Australia with the Phase 3 trial, Australian government R&D tax incentives are expected to be recognised in future financial years. As previously stated, cash outflows are also expected to increase in subsequent periods as the company commences recruitment for the Phase 3 IIH Evolve trial. Notwithstanding the increase in cash utilisation in subsequent periods, I remind investors the company is fully funded to complete this trial for Presendin for registration purposes in the EU, UK and Australia from our current cash reserves. Investors should anticipate cash outflows to increase in subsequent periods, as I mentioned, as the company initiates these new clinical sites and receives additional regulatory approvals and commences recruitment for this trial. However, as you can see by the quarterly provided today, our corporate and administrative costs relative to the accelerated costs in R&D remain well controlled. We are primarily focusing our financial resources to IIH Evolve. Importantly, the company is funded, as I mentioned, to register this drug. Now turning to the operating highlights. During the quarter, Invex made considerable progress towards the commencement of its global Phase 3 IIH Evolve trial for patients with idiopathic intracranial hypertension, or IIH. Based on extensive chemistry, manufacturing control, CMC, data, coupled with key clinical and regulatory input, the company successfully compiled a number of key documents, including the Investigational Medicinal Product Dossier, or IMPD, for Presendin, the Investigator's Brochure, and the IIH Evolve study protocol. All are required for commencement of the IIH Evolve study in the European Union, United Kingdom, and in the United States following Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, approval. In addition, the IIH Evolve clinical trial was accepted onto the leading database of privately and publicly funded clinical trials conducted around the world, being clinicaltrials.gov, under identifier NCT 0534747. Clinical supplies of both Presendin and placebo drug product manufactured by Peptron under the terms of the Collaboration and Manufacturing Agreement signed in 2021 are currently awaiting customs clearance for labelling in the United States before dispatch to the initial clinical sites. We are permitted to dispatch to these sites once regulatory approvals are in place and we have completed the clinical site agreements, which are contracts with the site to actually conduct the trial with our contract research organisation, being Premier Research. Let's now discuss the status of our regulatory approvals. As most investors will appreciate, IAH Evolve is a single phase 3 clinical trial seeking registration of a proprietary drug formulation of exenatide called Presendin. Ultimately, our aim is to secure all necessary regulatory approvals, and we're also required human ethics approval to undertake a completely harmonised trial across several countries in Europe, the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Israel. This is a significant undertaking, as different regulatory bodies may request different or additional elements to our CMC package, investigator's brochure, or study protocol, for example. So our strategy has been to garner a beachhead with our regulatory package with key regulators in the UK, being the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or MHRA, and via an Australian Human Research Ethics Committee, or HREC, along with the Therapeutics Good Administration, or TGA, in Australia. The UK has historically provided significant influence and thought leadership, particularly with innovative medicines like Presendin and innovative approaches such as gene therapy and advanced therapies across Europe. Hence, following Brexit, the MHRA is viewed as a strong and positive regulator. Our discussions with the MHRA and HREC has allowed the company to refine, improve, and adapt the IAH Evolve trial to a standard that meets the high hurdles of these and other agencies. It is also far more cost-effective and efficient than casting the net far and wide and simultaneously with different global regulators. Importantly, this strategy for us and investors has borne fruit. Late in the quarter, Invex secured its first regulatory approval for the trial with the MHRA, clearing the company's clinical trial authorisation, or CTA, to commence the phase 3 trial. In addition, Invex received a favourable ethics opinion from a research ethics committee, which was also a requirement prior to commencing the trial in the United Kingdom. Invex intends to open a number of clinical sites across the UK and will now progress institutional contracts to facilitate commencement of patient recruitment as soon as possible. Indeed, and shortly after the end of the quarter in early July, we also announced the receipt of HREC approval and clinical trial notification, CTN, via the CTN scheme from the TGA to commence the IAH Evolve phase 3 trial in Australia. So this HREC covers a number of private hospital sites in Australia that are planned to participate in the trial, with Invex shortly to file an additional and separate HREC application for a single public hospital in Australia. Invex has commenced the initiation of IAH Evolve clinical trial sites and remains on track, as with the United Kingdom, to commence patient recruitment once separate institutional authorisations are completed. So looking at the UK and Australia, following a formal review of site capability, we have now selected approximately 80% of the planned sites for these two countries, and patient recruitment will commence as I mentioned, as we progressively contract with these sites and deliver clinical and placebo materials. In addition, we are aiming to secure an investigational new drug application, or IND, with the US FDA, along with competent authority approvals in Europe, to commence recruitment in several countries within Europe, along with Israel and New Zealand, all of which will be progressively undertaken or executed in the current half. So looking forward, by the end of the calendar year, our aim is to secure all of the necessary approval, with most of the 40 planned clinical sites open and actively recruiting IAH patients. Turning now to some important staff changes, recognising the important internal talent at Invex, we appointed Carol Parrish to Chief Operating Officer from 1 July. Carol is currently the Head of Clinical Operations at Invex and has done an excellent job in managing our clinical program. By way of background, Carol has been a pharmaceutical professional for over 33 years within the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, and she's been accountable for all phases of drug development and in multiple therapy areas. Prior to joining Invex, she was the Global Clinical Operations Lead at Intercept Pharmaceuticals and has held various senior clinical positions at Stifel, which was acquired by GSK or GlaxoSmithKline in 2009, which included a role as Senior Director of Global Clinical Development for a new drug, which also involved collaborating with GSK Japan and China. She's also spent over 20 years at Merck & Co. and Johnson & Johnson. Welcome, Carol, to the new role. Also during the quarter, we continued our scientific meeting presentations and peer review on the phase 2 pressure trial. The strategy here for generating podium presence at key meetings in neuro-ophthalmology was to build clinician awareness and acceptance of our clinical endeavours, and of course, to recruit neuro-ophthalmologists and key opinion leaders in IAH to consider participating in the phase 3 trial. Invex has generated a large number of leads from presentations made to the 92nd Aerospace Medical Association annual meeting, the 15th European Neuro-Ophthalmology Society meeting, or UNOS, and the 48th annual meeting of the North American Neuro-Ophthalmology Society, or NANOS. Noting the scientific merit of our phase 2 pressure trial, Dr. James Mitchell, presenting on behalf of the Invex phase 2 pressure study investigators, was actually awarded Best Abstract at the meeting held in February, which was NANOS, and Best Scientific Paper at the Aerospace Medical Association meeting. So in summary, we've been pleased with our progress during the quarter and look forward to additional regulatory approvals and the commencement of recruitment of our first patient, most likely in Australia or the UK in the near term. I'd now like to hand the call over to the operator for Q&A. Please go ahead, Melanie.
Thank you. If you wish to ask a question, you will need to press the star key followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you wish to cancel your request, please press star 2. If you're on a speakerphone, please pick up the handset to ask your question. We'll now pause a moment to allow for any questioners to register. Your first question comes from Richard Cho with Storage. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, in the past you've said that the trial recruitment process will take about 24 months. Is that still the case? And if that's the case, then do you expect the first readout to be somewhere kind of second half of 2024?
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so if you look at the recruitment profile, yes, we expect to recruit all 240 patients over 24 months. But remember, as a double-blind placebo-controlled trial with a 6-month follow-up, we need to wait for the last patient to have completed the 6 months of dosing, i.e. 24 weeks. And so that's effectively a 2.5-year process from first patient to last patient being fully dosed. And so from there, we need to lock the database, clean the database, report the data, and then thereafter sort of file for if the clinical results are positive and statistically significant, we then file with global regulators. So what you would be looking at is sometime between 2.5 years and 3 years, the company would not only report its clinical results, but also be in a position, if positive, to file and potentially receive regulatory approvals.
And just to follow up, will there be kind of, so the readout will be after the whole study is completed. Will there be kind of any preview or anything like that in this study?
No, so we've not, as part of the design, included any form of interim analyses. This is a very straightforward 120 patients per arm followed for 6 months, so it's half to placebo, half to the Presendin drug product.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Once again, if you wish to ask a question, please press star 1 on your telephone and wait for your name to be announced. We'll pause a moment to allow for any final questioners to register. There are no further questions at this time. I'll now hand back to Mr. Duthy for closing remarks.
Thanks, Melanie, and thank you again, everyone, for listening today. We certainly look forward to our next update. It's going to be an exciting quarter and half year for us as we close out the 2022 calendar year with these regulatory and patient recruitment milestones. So we look forward to updating all of our investors when we achieve these goals. So thank you again for listening, and goodbye for now.
That does conclude our conference for today. Thank you for participating. You may now disconnect.